I'm glad you are here, and we are glad that Jennifer Lainhart, did I pronounce it?
Close enough, you did great.
Yeah.
Your accent is perfect.
Yeah, I have decided to keep it. I have decided to keep it. And she's here, and we are going to get an interesting window again into something that some of you may know more than some others. But this is the whole plan and purpose of these evenings, that we are here to see in or through the window that our speaker, keynote speaker, will open up for us. And thank you, Jenny, for taking time. It's a busy place. I'm listening to you and discussing and talking a little bit, and she may have to sneak out just a little bit before the deadline. There's some emergencies, I guess, taking place at the place, but we are glad you are here. And also, you have a little worksheet. Every time when you come to church, you get homework. So it's just the two simple things for you to think about as you listen to Jennifer and as we get into that conversation part. So what might be the biblical context of this all, talking about children and youth? And then what might be the practical applications for us to launch a ministry, to connect with people, or to do something useful for this, what we are hearing tonight. So that's the assignment for us. Let's say a prayer, and then we let Jennifer to talk. Dear Heavenly Father, we have come together tonight to listen to you and to listen to Jennifer as your servant. And Lord, as we love children and we love youth and we love families, Lord, help us to see through this window that we are about to hear. And help us to be open, help us to see what you see, and help us to hear what you hear. And Lord, when we listen to this presentation, help us to picture better, see better into the lives of this community where you have placed us to minister and to serve you. In Christ's name we pray. Amen.
We feel right at home. She has a good Finnish accent.
Yeah.
Yeah. My accent, I hold on to that too.
Yeah.
I can't get rid of it. So I grew up in Waco. Do you all know where Waco is? Yeah. So I grew up there. So it's hard to get rid of that farm girl accent. But that's okay. I embrace it. So I am from Hope Swings Domestic Violence Program. Did you all know that Madison County had a domestic violence program and shelter? Mm-hmm. Good. I sometimes go to places where people still don't know, and then I remind myself, even though we've been here since 2009, Madison County's growing, right? We have a lot of people moving into the community, and so my work in spreading the news that Hope Swings exists seems to always continue on, and that's okay. I'm grateful for it. So what I wanted to talk with you all tonight about is Hope's Wings, and I'm going to talk very little about Hope's Wings because I want to focus more on the people that we serve, specifically the kids that come into our shelter. I know that you all are really focusing on youth and the way that they see things and the things that they're exposed to, and so we will talk a lot about that tonight, but I also want to give you some time to ask questions. I think like conversation is the way that we learn the most about people and organizations, and I want you all to know everything that you want to know about what we do and some things that maybe you all may want to get involved in with us eventually. So Hope's Wings is a facility located in Richmond, but we are a Madison County shelter, which means that we belong to Berea just as much as we do Richmond. We just happened upon some farmland in Richmond, and so we built our shelter there. We are a 7,000 square foot facility on 5 acres of farmland, and we're debt free. We are debt free because we're good stewards with our money. We pray a lot. We, lean on our churches a lot, and we just try to be good stewards. And so I think God blesses us a lot, actually, there. So anytime you want a visit, if a group of you want to come, just call me. Your pastor has my number, and we'll arrange a time to do a little tour or something, because I want you to see what you're supporting, should you decide to do that. But like I said, I want to talk more with you tonight about the people that we serve. In our shelter, we have women who come in as individuals, and we have women who come in with their kids. So At any point in time, we're going to have any amount of children that stay in our shelter, and they range from newborn all the way up to, we've had 17-year-olds stay. Most recently, we've had a lot of smaller children, but I will tell you, one year we had 6 teenagers. I know, all teenagers. But I will tell you, they were the best group of teens you've ever seen. They got along really well. There was one boy in the group of 5 girls, and they picked on him, and he took it all in, and they created a talent show and sold us tickets and told us there was no refund, and then required me to purchase the refreshments for their reception. And I will always give them what they want when they do things like that. But we have kids there. So statistically, 1 in 4 women will experience domestic violence in her lifetime. Now, if you count the number of women in here, how many women? Somebody count. 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 to 13 women. So how many women technically, if we're going statistically, would have experienced domestic violence in this room? 3. Exactly, which means all of you possibly know somebody who is a victim or was a victim at some point in their lives of domestic violence. Now, 1 in 9 men typically are victims of domestic violence. I would say that number is greater, it's just men don't report that as much. But I would say the number is greater because people are just sometimes mean-natured, and women can be just as much as men. And so, 1 in 9 men. 1 in 15 children grow up in homes where domestic violence occurs. In this nation, 1 in 15 kids. That means 1/3 of our nation's children live in violent homes. They either experience the violence or they witness that violence, and it affects them greatly. A lot of times when women come in the shelter, they'll say, well, he was abusive to me, but he was a great dad to our kids. He never hit our kids. Well, he never hit the kids, but they're affected by the violence just the same when they grow up in that type of environment. So 1/3 of our nation's kids grow up in homes where violence occurs. Children who grow up in homes where violence happens are more likely to abuse substances or alcohol. They are more likely to suffer from disorders like anxiety and depression and post-traumatic stress disorders. They are most likely to fail in school or quit altogether. They are more likely to have criminal histories as they get older and are more likely to be batterers or victims. So those kids have a lot of circumstances that end up in their paths when they grow up in homes like that. So one of the things that we do at Hope's Wings, besides working with their moms or their dads when they come to us, is we really try to figure out how to plant seeds for those kids. So for instance, when a mom comes in with her children, our services are typically for her. Our grants pay for services for her. However, I recognize that a lot of times an adult is going to end up making the decision that he or she wants to make regardless. We can plant seeds with them and they will allow us to help or they won't. They have a choice. A lot of times the kids don't, right? So even though our grants may not always pay for us to provide services for the kids, doesn't mean that we're not gonna do it. We still provide those services. We still try to figure out how we can make a difference in that kid's life. So one of the things that we want to do first is meet with mom one-on-one and kind of get a feel for what she believes her child went through living in that home. And if I get the story of, oh, he was a great dad, we talk about things that likely her child witnessed that she just may not know and may not recognize. And sometimes there's a light bulb that goes off, you know, and they have that aha moment like, oh, I didn't think about them hearing us screaming, or I didn't think about them, you know, seeing this or that and how it might affect them. So they have a light bulb moment, and that's good. That's good when that light bulb moment occurs, because when that happens, mom's more likely to help that child with some mental health services. And that's what we would do next. We try to always refer mom and child to mental health care. Madison County is full of mental health care providers, from White House Clinic to Entrust to Mindset, lots of different providers. And we keep all kinds of referral forms and phone numbers because I think that's important. I think that when you experience violence, it's certainly when our kids experience it, I think we need professionals who can help them process that and figure things out. So that's number 2 of what we do. Number 3, we really try to plant seeds for those kids. Do any of you all have memories from your childhood where an adult might have made an impact on you for whatever reason? I mean, I think we all do. I do. I had a Bible school teacher one time give a lesson about trying to see things through the eyes of God, and how things, even ugly things that we may see ugly, are really kind of beautiful if you look past the ugly. And she gave an example of an old junkyard. I grew up in Waco, I told you so. Webb's junkyard was right there, and you had to drive through it to get to my house. And so I always used to think, well, that's so ugly, it's so nasty to drive through. But she, used that as an example, and she was like, but what does that junkyard do for him? It provides a living for his family. And she brought, things that were positive, and that made an impact on me. I think that shaped the way that I tried to look at things in my world. Growing up as an adult, I constantly think, well, not everything is as ugly as it may appear. Let's try to find the positive. Let's try to find the good. And we want to do that with our kids too. So we really try to be that for children when they come into the shelter, whether it's taking some extra time to do coloring with them or play board games, or even when mom can't mentally get there, because sometimes mom can't mentally get there, right? She's dealing with a lot, and so when she can't, we try to do those things. A tradition that I have is on the first day of school, I like to bring the kids breakfast. Typically we'll spring for McDonald's and bring them breakfast, and we have breakfast together. And I do different little things. In the past, I'd gotten some rocks. We had some rocks out front, and I'd written a Bible verse that reminded me of them. I tried to take some time and individualize it for them. But then during breakfast, we talked about David, right? David was the least of his brothers, right? They didn't expect much from him. He didn't get the attention that his brothers got. And I reminded them that even though David was the least and had quite a bit of conflict ahead of him, that he managed to change his entire world with just one little rock, right? One little rock, one little story, or one little choice. David was able to change his whole world. His father did not determine his path. His brothers did not determine his path. His choice determined his path. Answering his calling determined his path. And I want the kids to know that even though their circumstance in that moment isn't great, living in a shelter, knowing what their mom went through, that doesn't have to become their life. They still have choices that they can make as they grow. And so we try to do that. We try to plant seeds. Sometimes I get to see them come to fruition, and sometimes I don't, and just have to pray that it takes root and something changes for a child. But those are some things that we try to do for kids that come in, because they see some pretty harsh things. When they do talk about it, it's not pleasant, it's not easy. They see some hard things, and I think that they need to see that there's hope sometimes too. So those are things that we try to do for kids and for the people that we serve. But I want to also ask you if you have questions for me, because I'm talking a lot and I could talk for a long time without breathing.
I think
We like your accent.
Oh, so you want me to keep talking? I like yours, so I might invite you to come up here and help me.
I think a few, probably pre-COVID, when we had Hope's Wings visitors here for the Methodist Women's program, I remember you all talking about how volunteers in the community can come in and offer some companionship or mentor or programming not that you did it in an official way, but there were ways you could use volunteers. So what does that look like?
So, yeah, pre-COVID, we did have a lot more volunteers
Yeah.
than what we do now. We always love to have volunteers do outside activities for us, because one, since COVID, outside's better than in. But we also need help with like groundwork. Like, we're a small staff, so when it comes to keeping up our weeding, and we have a large, if you haven't been there, we have quite a bit of landscape space, so help with that is always great. And typically, people come like at the beginning of spring, when things are starting to grow and green up, and then kind of at the end, you know, and sometimes we have teenagers who come in between and will trim shrubs and pull weeds because their youth groups are looking for projects or whatever, and so outside work is always my go-to. But I'll tell you, a place what's really lacking, I think, for us, especially when we've got those older kids, and I'm talking like upper elementary school, 5th and 6th grades on up, are positive role models, positive male role models specifically, especially with the little boys. They don't get a lot of activity. We're a staff full of women. Well, we just have a fellow that just started with us, but he doesn't like kids very much. It's not that he doesn't like kids, they scare him. And so I don't know how big of a role model like he might be. But having that mentorship, I would love to start some type of mentor program for the kids that come stay at the shelter. And we have kids that also live in our housing program, because we have people out in the community as well. Hope Swings is a 3-phase program, meaning when they come to us, they're in crisis, and we address that crisis, whether that's filing emergency protection orders, going to the hospital to get medical care, setting them up with food benefits, or getting clothes, because sometimes they come in with what they're wearing and maybe a change if they're lucky. So we're addressing those crises. After the crisis, we focus on sustainability. Most women or men will return to their abusers because they can't financially sustain themselves or their children. About 85% actually return for that reason. And we recognized that back in 2012 and did a little change up in our programming. So what we do now is we help them with education. If they have not completed their GED, then we help them do that if they want it. If they haven't held a job for a number of years, we get them involved in some training that helps them develop job skills if they know what they want to do. We help them with resume writing and looking for jobs, and financial literacy, and domestic violence support groups, so they know how not to choose a relationship that can be dangerous for them in the future. So we do those types of things in phase 2 of our program. And when they start to meet some of those goals, whether it's getting a job or going back to school or whatever, we will help them go into phase 3 of our program, which is housing out in the community. So we will help them find safe and affordable housing here in Madison County, and we will pay a portion or all of their rent for up to 2 years. And during that 2-year period, we're doing home visits where we're doing case management in their home. We're helping them navigate day-to-day problems that we're used to navigating, but they are not, because they've been controlled for a long time, right? And so a lot of times when you're in an abusive relationship, it isn't just physical, it's controlling too. And so you don't maybe get to pay your own bills because you're not given money, or you're only given a certain amount of money to go to the grocery store with a very specific list. And so they're learning those life skills all over again. So when we go to their homes, we're helping with things like that. How do you navigate those problems that just pop up? If you run out of food this month and that was what you were budgeted for, where can you get food? We're just navigating those types of things. For up to 2 years, they get those services. So our programming is very, actually, more than just a shelter, and we're proud of that. Yes.
Typically, how many new persons pass through the shelter each year?
It depends. It can be, we're typically between 60 to 80 a year. It all just depends on how quickly they move through the program. Some people are in okay shape. Some people have a work history. Some people, you know, can move pretty quickly. They just really need help with that violence piece, and establishing safety. And other people come in and they have never worked. They don't have anything, to help. We have a mom right now who's Hispanic, and her entire citizenship relied on her husband, who is in jail and is a terrible person, and who now is trying to turn her into ICE for marriage fraud. And that's what he held over her head. And so we're working with her to get an immigration status so she can actually divorce him, because actually being married to him does not really make her a legal citizen. So contrary to what some people believe, like it doesn't. There's still a time limit and all of that. And so she's going to be with us for a minute, and that's okay. That's okay, because we want her to be established and okay. But she wants to work really badly, but she can't work. You know, she can't work legally. And so she has lots of challenges, but she wants to go to college. She's 21, she wants to go to college. And so we want her to get that status, and we want her to go to college. So we're already working with the Scholar House program at EKU. I don't know if any of you are familiar with the Scholar House, but we're already working with them to lay that groundwork. So when we are able to get her to a certain place in her immigration process, she can apply. So it all just depends. And obviously, if people move quickly, we have room for more people. If they move slowly, then we only have so much room. And when we don't have space, we refer to other shelters in the state, if they're willing to go.
Do the children who are on the premises go to school at the school they were going to, or do they just have to, I mean, are they usually in the vicinity of where they were going to school, or
Sometimes they are, and if they choose to stay, the school system has to accommodate them, and they will. It's just typically we have to go to the Madison County Board and arrange all of that. But a lot of times they'll go to the school whose district we fall in, and the school bus will pick them up at the shelter first and drop them off last. That way those kids don't have to answer any questions to any other children about where they were getting on the bus at and stuff. So, but they can choose, if it's safe for them to go to their school, they can choose to stay there, and we can make arrangements. Sometimes.
What is the most people are there at one time? What's your capacity?
There can be 12 adult women there at any point in time, and any number of children. So the way our building is set up, we have a long hallway of 4 bedrooms. In those 4 bedrooms, there's 4 beds in each room. That's our family wing. So there can be 4 moms with any number of kids, because she's going to have a room for her and her children. She's not gonna have to share that bedroom with anybody else. Then we finished construction on another wing where we've got 2 bedrooms for single ladies. And those bedrooms have 4 beds in them, and there can be up to 4 women in those rooms at a time. So 12 adult women at any point in time, and any number of kids, because not too long ago we had a mom with 6 kids, which was quite challenging.
Do they have doctors on site, like doctors and psychologists and all that, or do you just recommend them to someone?
We have to refer. We don't have the money. I would love to have a counselor employed. We just don't have that kind of money, but that's okay. We're in a community that has lots of doctors. And honestly, thanks to the Affordable Health Care Act, people have insurance and access to mental health that they didn't before. Like years ago when we started, and we had a lot of people who didn't have health insurance, getting that mental health care was near impossible. We contracted with one of my favorite people in the world. Her name is Melissa Neal. Some of you all may know her, and some of you may not. But Melissa would come to the shelter 1 or 2 nights a week, and she would say, okay, I'm gonna be here for 3 hours. So have your ladies, sign up and come. And we provided a space, and she was able to do that. I love her. She's one of my favorite people. So, but now, because of the Affordable Health Care Act, so many kids have health insurance, and so do the ladies, and it's just more available to them now. So we're able to require, and we've got some great partners out in the community, so.
Are you only servicing Madison County, or you get some surrounding?
Well, we have a lot of people who come to us from surrounding counties. Madison County is our priority. However, if I have an empty bed and a woman from London calls, or the London shelter calls me and says, hey, I'm at capacity and I don't have space for this mom and this child, I'm certainly not gonna turn them away. Because at the end of the day, our job is to serve very vulnerable people. And if I've got space, I'm gonna serve them. But our priority is Madison County.
How do people know about you?
Word of mouth mostly. So doing things like this, so I can let people know that I'm here. I love it when I'm invited to come and speak to, especially our churches, but any groups. So I attend some Kiwanis groups and some of the Ruritan clubs in the county invite me, and some of the civics like the Rotary clubs and those types of things. I'll attend those every chance I get. Schools, same way. I'll go and talk to the family resource directors. Law enforcement, we've tried to put our stamp with law enforcement for years now, and it took a lot of work. I've got the best victims advocate in the world. Her name is Suzanne Howell, and she has worked really hard to really get in the door with law enforcement. Actually, her office is at the Richmond Police Department. We were able to get a grant where we were able to partner with them, so she is part of the first response for victims of domestic violence. As soon as Detective Kraft gets a call, he's the special victims investigator there, they share an office.
Do the
Suzanne
emergency
does.
rooms like know to call you?
The emergency rooms, absolutely.
Okay.
So, yep, so we do everything that we can to
Do
spread
you
the
have
word.
to, do you go to the emergency room frequently? You have to go there? or-
Suzanne is our victims advocate, so
Okay.
if they call, if the victim wants somebody or the police call, she goes,
Okay.
yeah. But thank you, that's a really good question. And then, of course, all of you, I hope, now that you know about us and have known about us, if you were to, need our services because of a family member or a friend is experiencing something, then now you know to spread that word too.
Why you call it shelter? I was just wondering, is it from the white shelter? I'm sure it's offering shelter for victims of home violence, but domestic violence, but why shelter? Why the name shelter?
Well, actually, a lot of people don't know, but the name of our shelter is the Marilyn Isaacs House. So Hope's Wings is the program, and it's actually, a lot of people say the Hope's Wings Domestic Violence Shelter. It's Hope's Wings Domestic Violence Program, and our shelter is actually called the Marilyn Isaacs House. But it's so hard to explain that every time you go someplace.
Just curious.
So it's
Just
easy
curious.
to say shelter. But it's named the Marilyn Isaacs House because Jewel Isaacs sold us a piece of farmland very cheap, which is why our shelter is built in Richmond, because she sold us farmland very, very cheap. Marilyn Isaacs was her daughter. Marilyn Isaacs was this fantastic woman in our community who was a mentor to a lot of young girls and young women. She was a school teacher here in Berea, a music teacher, and she coached softball. She was my softball coach from the time I was 11 years old, and through the league in the city, and then she ended up coaching at Madison Central for a while, and so I played for her there. But Marilyn Isaacs was just a phenomenal woman. Very patient, a mentor to a lot of young kids who didn't have a lot of positive things in their lives when they were younger. So she's always gonna hold a special place in my heart, so I'm very glad that, very proud that the shelter is named for her. But yeah, a lot of people didn't know that.
Is Hope's Wings just in Kentucky, or are they all through the United States?
Just in
Is it a big
Kentucky.
program?
Just in Kentucky, there's obviously domestic violence programs all over the state, but we are just in Madison County. We were started as a true grassroots effort. A group of people from First Christian Church in Richmond started Hope's Wings. Kim DeCoste worked for the health department. She was getting her master's in public health and had to do a community assessment, needs assessment. Kim's passion was diabetes, actually, and so when she went out and did her community needs assessment, What she ended up finding, instead of a need for diabetes services, was a need for domestic violence services. Because the state-funded shelter that services Madison County is in Lexington, and they service 17 counties. So they are full most all of the time, not through any fault of their own, but because they serve 17 counties. It's a huge ag district. So the more she talked to people, the more of the need that she saw, and she talked to her pastor at First Christian, and they started, and not only did she talk to him, but I think during the same week there had happened to be 2 people who had reached out to him in need of those types of services. And so they were like, we need to do something. And that church had people like Harry Moberly Jr. and Ed Worley, who were political figures at the time, and those folks went to Frankfurt and were able to find some money through a startup grant with the state, and thanks to our judge executive at the time and our mayor and those people, they were able to get a nice startup grant that allowed us to purchase the land, build the building, which was 5,000 square feet, debt-free. Then a couple years ago, we added 2,000 more square feet with our education center. We built an education center because folks from EKU, New Opportunity School for Women, Kentucky Works, and Voc Rehab, all of them now bring classes to our ladies at the shelter. They don't have to go out anymore because transportation's a barrier sometimes. So now those folks come in and they bring in classes. Kentucky River Foothills is one of those partners, and they bring classes to us. And so we have an education center where they have computers set up that they can use for school or for job hunting or whatever. And just a nice classroom space, and then the extra wing of bedrooms for the single ladies. And that also is debt-free, and we just built that 2 years ago. So, like I said, we're very good stewards of our money. We do not want debt. We're a small nonprofit. It's just here in Madison County, so we don't want debt.
About the funding of your program, you probably already mentioned something, but I may have missed it. I mean, where you get, what are all the financial resources that come from?
We have grants, so, and we do a lot of fundraising. So we have a couple of federal grants through the Office of Violence Against Women. One is for transitional housing, which helps us with people out in the community. The other one is a grant called Increasing Criminal Justice Response, and that's the one that allows us to work with law enforcement and the prosecutors and 911, the detention center, all of those folks. We came together a few years ago and created the Madison County Blueprint for Safety. If you look on our website, you'll see that. It's one clear, cohesive domestic violence policy for our community.
Wow.
Instead of having everybody kind of working against each other, all of these agencies now work together. So every month and a half, we get together and we talk about domestic violence cases that have come up in the community. We talk about better ways we could have documented those crimes and prosecuted them better. It's a really beautiful thing when you can get all those offices working together, because before we were very fragmented and it was very hard. So we have a grant that funds that. We have some money from the Cabinet of Health and Family Services that allows us to offer early intervention services to women and kids. We have some foundation grants, but mostly we fundraise and rely on our community. So community donations are huge. But fundraising is a must still. We have a jail and bail coming up in March. It's our annual fundraising event. It's the one where we raise the most money. We literally are arresting community members, mostly politicians, because they don't want a bad reputation, so they'll pay money to keep that from happening. But we arrest our mayors. Mayor Fraley is arrested for us every year since he's been mayor. Mayor Blythe in Richmond's arrested. The city commissioners. I haven't been able to wrestle any of the city council members here to be arrested yet. We've got to lighten them up somehow. Yeah. We've got to figure that out, but haven't convinced them to yet. But the city commissioners are, and then just community members, pastors are arrested, and they raise bail. And I'm arrested, all of my board members are arrested. And the first year we did it, we raised like $7,000, which was awesome. And every year it just went up, and I'm a bit of an overachiever. I can't help it. So every year I say, I've gotta get more, I gotta get a little bit more, I gotta get more. So last year we raised almost $50,000. And that fundraiser is absolutely the best because it costs us nothing to do. Everybody donates food because, look, I run the best jail in town. There's no Radisson happening at Hope's Wings Jail. We provide breakfast catered by Chick-fil-A and lunch that usually comes in from Sonny's or Cane's or someplace like that. And Suzanne Howell is the best baker in the world, so she makes cookies. And so, no, it's the nicest jail anybody will ever be in. So I encourage everybody to be arrested on March 24th. But we turn it into just a fun day, and it allows people to come down and pay bail and hang out and eat and talk and get to know one another, get to know us. It's a nice event. So yeah, I've got my work cut out for me this year, unfortunately, because I never imagined that we would make the amount of money that we made last year. But people were generous. So fundraisers like that are a big deal. We have 2 major ones a year. The next one is a barbecue that we have at Chenault Vineyards in June. And we usually have a big concert and barbecue and just a night of mingling and stuff. And me begging people for money, which is fine. I don't mind.
What percentage of the year do you find yourself at capacity? Is that a problem yet, or
It's
not?
random. It's random. There's no real predicting anything. Sometimes people say, well, gosh, it's cold outside. It must be bad. And then they say, oh gosh, summertime's so hot. It must be bad. People are just irritable in general, and people who are abusive are irritable all the time. It doesn't matter because they're controlling. That's who they are. They're controlling. So their macaroni could have been burned, and they're going to be abusive. They could be too hot outside, and they're going to be abusive. They could be too cold. They're gonna be abusive. They're gonna slip on some ice and it's gonna be somebody else's fault but theirs, and they're gonna be abusive. So there's no real guessing as to when violence is worse. I mean, there's just not.
Actually, my question was, are you finding yourself at capacity a certain amount of, like 50% of the year?
Oh, I'm sorry, I misunderstood. So,
how close are you to needing more space?
we're not there yet. We're not there. What we have right now seems to be sufficient. I would say maybe 60% of the time we're at capacity, and that's pushing it. And with COVID, we kind of back stuff off. So the single ladies' rooms can hold up to 4 people, but I'm trying to only put 3 in them so people can space out, because I still worry very much about that. When a sickness like COVID or the flu or the stomach bug gets hold in a shelter, it's not one person that's down, it's the entire shelter. I mean, during COVID, we managed great the first wave, but the second wave was bad. When we got it, we got it. And we're a 24/7 shelter, so I can't afford for staff to get sick. If we get sick, we're working anyway. We don't have a choice. When you talk about essential workers, well, shelter workers are essential workers because you have to be there. And I mean, it hit us pretty hard. So I try to space people out. And honestly, I've been very lucky that that hasn't been a really hard thing to do right now. So I would say about 60% of the time.
Is there usually a time frame when somebody comes to your shelter? Do you say like 2 weeks they should be ready to go out on their own after getting help, or do you let them stay as long as they need to be?
I let them stay as long as they need to be and as long as they are actively participating.
Yeah.
They cannot stay if they come in and they don't want to participate in the support groups so they can learn how to see red flags in future relationships. They can't come and just lay in the bed. They can't come and just sit on the couch and watch TV. They have to actively participate, because at some point, I'm going to say, you know what? You're safe. You've been away from your abuse for a minute. You're just sitting here, and now we're gonna need to transition you to a homeless shelter because you're not participating. My goal for every woman who comes in that shelter is to be housed at the end of her time with us. And I will work so hard to make that happen if she works too. I'm never gonna work harder than somebody else. I'm not. There's too much going on, there's too many people in need. So as long as she is actively participating in her case plan and she's working towards goals that she wants to accomplish, then she can be there as long as it takes. Because I recognize that some people can't get there as quickly as other people. You know, some people don't have the education level. You know, if somebody can't read and they come in but they want to work and they want to do these things, we obviously got a bit farther to go with them than we might have with somebody who's got a college degree already. So it just all depends. But the thing that will have their time set for them is inactivity. I understand that there needs to be a little bit of time for them to kind of get themselves together and all that, and we're reasonable about that. But after a week and a half or 2 weeks of being there, they need to be ready to go. If they come in and they are violent or aggressive towards other residents or staff, they're not gonna stay. I have zero tolerance for that because it's supposed to be a safe space. So if they seem aggressive, we're gonna have a serious conversation because maybe there's a real reason that she's being aggressive. It could be the stress, but we'll have a conversation. And if it happens again, she's probably not gonna be there long. Drugs, no tolerance for drugs. I can't. And I understand that domestic violence a lot of times has co-occurring issues like substance abuse. So many people use drugs to medicate themselves, to deal with the violence. And it develops a very bad habit, a very bad addiction. But I can't have that at the shelter because at any point in time, a child could get a hold of a pill or meth or a needle. I can't do that. I'm never going to put a child in danger. And honestly, people who have the addiction like that aren't making good relationship choices because the addiction kind of takes precedence over that. So we have a really good working relationship with Liberty Place Recovery Center for Women in Richmond that we almost always lean on. So if someone comes in and they have that problem and I have to discharge them from our shelter, if they will allow me to, I will work very hard to get them into a treatment facility. And if they get that treatment, then we'll bring them back to shelter. If they finish that program and they still need help with domestic violence, we'll bring them back to shelter then, but they gotta treat that addiction first. So there are a couple of things that will actually get somebody very shortlisted.
How many staff do you have and what kind of credentials do they need to work there?
10 staff members. 2 are AmeriCorps members, which means that they're with us for a year, but they're doing a service. They earn a stipend. They're not actual employees. I contract with AmeriCorps, which means I pay a fee and they get to come. The rest are staff. I have 2 social workers on staff. The rest are people who were just willing to learn. The only real need that I need when I hire somebody is somebody who's open to learning and open to communication and open to learning, you know. Working with broken people doesn't necessarily require a degree all the time. It requires empathy, it requires active listening, it requires non-judgment, and it requires just the want to, you know, the want to help somebody. And I'll train, but we do have 2 social workers on staff.
You have volunteers?
We do have some volunteers, but I don't have a lot of volunteer staff because we learned early on when we tried to do that volunteers are just that. When you volunteer for a program, you might not want to show up tomorrow just because you're volunteering and you don't want to, right? You're not getting paid, so you don't really feel it, so it wasn't very successful, you know? And so we don't have a lot of that. If somebody comes to me and they talk to me and they really want to do it and they listen to me, then I'm willing to try it. It's just, domestic violence victims are real messy. And sometimes volunteers come, especially our church groups, they have the best of intentions, but they don't recognize the messiness of domestic violence sometimes. And they come in with these rose-colored glasses that all of these people are broken and sad and pitiful and they just want help and need help. When in actuality, you have some of those people, they're all broken, don't get me wrong, but some of them are really unlikable. Like they really are. They've lived in chaos for a long time. They don't know how to live in anything other than chaos. And it takes a minute to change that behavior. They come in and sometimes they're manipulative because they've had to manipulate to survive. And so that's a behavior that they have to unlearn. They have to learn that they can trust people, and sometimes that's not likable. And if you're not trained or you don't have a lot of patience, you don't recognize that and you don't last very long because you get burned. And so I struggle sometimes with bringing in volunteers because I don't want people to come in and be like, oh, those people there, they don't really need help. They're awful. When, yeah, they are sometimes. They just are. They need patience. They need people who will stand by them through the awfulness, minus the aggressive, mean violence. I won't tolerate that, but sometimes awful behaviors are just awful behaviors and you just have to work through it. And people need that. And so sometimes it's hard with volunteers like that, which is why I kind of like the idea of mentor programs, especially with kids, because a lot of kids don't get to go fishing, they don't get to play baseball. They don't get to do those activities like karate and things like that when they come stay in shelter. They don't have the resources to do that. I'd take them fishing, but
What kind of facilities do you have for the kids? Is there a craft room or a playroom or jungle gym or?
yeah, we have a playroom, we have a jungle gym outside. We used to have bicycles, but gosh, they ran into a lot of cars, and so I had to get rid of the bicycles. But yeah, they have a jungle gym outside, they have a playroom inside, we have a video game system inside. I don't encourage kids to sit on that all the time, but it is a good distraction sometimes when mom's trying to cook dinner.
Creative things, arts and crafts programs?
We try. We try to do that. It all just depends, again, on where they're at. And we never force anybody to participate. We don't force them. We encourage it. That's gonna dictate how much help we're gonna give and how much time we're gonna put into it. But we try to give them activities and things.
Do you
So-
have churches you participate, partnership with that help out a lot? Like, do you have a main church you go to for a pastor or a preacher or a chaplain?
Not a main church per se. We have a lot of churches that want to get involved, and a lot of churches who on a yearly basis will come out and do an activity like the grounds keeping or painting. We have a gazebo out back, painting the gazebo or our storage building or staining the kids' jungle gym. A lot of churches who have like activities and then they'll donate like a portion of their white elephant sale monies to the shelter, or they donate to lots of charities. A portion comes to Hope's Wings, a portion may go to the Pregnancy Health Center, a portion may go to Habitat. There's so many charities in Madison County, you can't go wrong to any of them that you choose to donate. We all lean on one another. At any point in time, I'm gonna be using God's Outreach for some food. At any point in time, they're gonna contact me because somebody's come in who's been battered and they need some assistance with that. So we lean on each other, we never compete for funds. You can't go wrong to any of those. If you all have a personal favorite of a charity, I encourage you to donate locally. If anything, you should invest in your own community, right? Because it's what you lean on, it's what your children will lean on. So I encourage you to donate locally, but you pick a charity of your choice and just be faithful to it and give. Because charities, it's hard. It's harder to get money these days.
Well, you raised the question, does anybody come in and offer spiritual help for those folks?
Okay, so because of the federal grants that we get, we can't be a faith-based organization.
I didn't ask that.
Yeah, I know, I'm coming around to it. I'm coming around to it, because I get that a lot. So what we do instead is, for instance, if you want to do a Bible study at the shelter, then you give me a flyer and some information and I post it, and a lot of times they'll sign up for it. They'll sign up and they want to do some activity, they want to do that, and we'll provide the space. You can come and do a Bible study with them. They have to sign up for it. If there are people that need that spiritual guidance, they are feeling very disconnected from their church because they had to leave, I talk to them and figure out what faith they have, because we have a lot of people who are Catholic. We have people who are Baptist and Methodist and all that. And so I try to connect them with the church that they're used to, their faith. So,
Okay.
but no specific person who comes in to offer that.
All right, so that is a part of your screening then, is that you try to offer the services to offer them the ability to connect with someone else?
Yeah, absolutely.
How often is that happen?
It happens pretty frequently,
Okay,
actually.
good.
Yeah, it happens pretty frequently. We've got a couple of women right now who attend church every Sunday. You know, they made a connection and they go every Sunday. Our Hispanic girl wanted to, but she's having trouble. It's a little harder for her. She's very limited in her English, and First Baptist in Richmond does have a Hispanic program, but it's, for some reason, she's having trouble getting there. And it could be because her son is a toddler, and it's hard for her to get ready on Sunday mornings, but that's important to her, and their pastors reached out to her. So we just try to talk to them and figure out what it is that what they need and what they want.
Of course, sort of toward the end of the first year of COVID, our Vacation Bible School team started talking about, rather than doing Vacation Bible School here, having people do it in their neighborhood with assistance from the team. And I'm wondering if a Vacation Bible School outreach would be something, once we've done ours here, and we have all the supplies, or we've done it in a neighborhood, and we have everything all set up, would that be something that you think residents might
Possibly.
be interested in?
Possibly.
Sounds like you'd have to go through that vetting process of
Well,
asking.
yeah, well, or
It's-
the poster sign up.
The Bible schools are a little bit different. Have you noticed that like when Bible schools happen, parents are like, yes, sign me up. And they'll go to one Bible school after another, Bible school after another, because it's a great summer activity for kids who've been out of school
And the
for a
kids
long
love it.
time. And the kids love it. So almost when it comes to Bible school, they're not that caught up on denomination, you know? And so, so that's not as challenging as you might think when it comes to the Bible school stuff,
So that might be a poster.
yeah, it's definitely something that you should reach out to me about when it gets closer to.
We'll have to see if we can, sometimes we struggle just to get ours all lined up, but
Yeah.
once you get it all figured out, if you've got volunteers that'll
Mhm.
go and do it again.
Even if you did a one night, it doesn't have to necessarily be a week-long Bible study, but a one night Bible school where
We
there's
did
an
3
activity.
nights last year here, right?
Yeah, so.
Jennifer, can you say something about children or youth as they follow their parents or their mom all the way through these traumatic seasons?
I can't, and then I have to go because.
Yes, yes, something
Mary.
describing.
So, a lot of times when kids are seeing their moms go through this, they kind of go through stages themselves, right? They come in and they're not as well behaved either. They've seen their mom treated pretty poorly. We had a Hispanic family one time who was just fantastic, but the boy was preteen and he was not nice to his mom because that's what he had witnessed, right? And so one time he was giving her some kind of trouble, and I said, hey, Khalif, I was like, you don't talk to your mother like that. We don't talk that way to each other here. We learn to talk with kindness and respect. He was like, Miss Jennifer, how did you know what I was saying to my mom? I said, because I have 2 children. I have 2 teenagers that I've raised, and I understand sass. That is a universal language. Your tone told me all I needed to know, and you don't talk to your mom like that. And so he kind of took a step back. And so it took a minute of like teaching the kids that there's a proper way of talking too. So as mom's going through that and she's learning that she doesn't have to live in chaos, the kids are learning that with her. They're learning that they can have, the reason they have their own rooms is because I want them to be able to go into that room and be a family unit. I don't want them to feel like they have to be part of a shelter community all the time. I want them to be able to go to their rooms and play a game or watch a TV show together or go to bed at the time that they want to go to bed. So the kids are learning that too with mom as she's going. In an ideal situation, sometimes it's not ideal, but that's what we aim for. And when mom gets into counseling, so does that child. And then when mom moves out, we try to make them part of that process too. Like, what do you want your room to be? We want them to be excited. So hopefully their patterns and their behaviors change together along the way while they're with us. That's what we aim for.
Wonderful. All right, okay, I'm sure you have lots of more questions, but we are so thankful, Jennifer, for you that you came.
Well, I'm
Truly.
thankful that you invited me. Thank you so much.
Yes, and if you don't mind, if you have to go, we would like to say a quick prayer for you.
I
How would you
appreciate
feel about that?
I would have absolutely appreciated
Yeah.
that.
Well, if you can step a little bit closer here, and I'm asking people to come over here and reach out for you, and we pray for you. Would that be okay?
Yes.